Have you ever got in like an argument with someone or had like a falling out with a friend, and then you like go to Walmart and you see them like, but maybe they don't see you, or maybe you see each other but you don't realize it, and you're just kind of like avoiding one another, trying not to talk and like ducking out and hiding from someone, or sometimes if you see someone, if you're trying to get out of Walmart and you see somebody who talks a lot and you're like, oh no, I don't have time to be in here for another like 30 minutes. So I'm just going to like act like I don't see them and get on out of here. Or what's even worse is if you like dated someone and the breakup went bad and then you see them at Walmart, then you're just like, all right, I'm leaving my buggy. I'm jetting out. I'm out of here right now. I don't want to talk to them or be in the same, breathe the same air that they're breathing. That's how bad it was. So I'm sure some of you can identify with that. It's kind of like some of the scenarios that we can encounter in Scripture. Um, we're going to talk about Acts chapter 8 tonight, and Philip going into Samaria and preaching the gospel. And that was a really taboo thing because Samaritans and Jews did not mesh. They kind of avoided one another like you would at Walmart if you saw your ex. And similarly, in our culture, sometimes white people will avoid black people. You know, if a group of white ladies are walking down the street, they see some black men coming, they might cross the street because they don't feel safe. Kind of like that kind of idea of thing happening with the Samaritans and Jews as well. So we just want to recap. We've been talking through the book of Acts and about how that there's this pattern of spiritual empowerment to engage in cross-cultural mission. And a few weeks ago, I defined what cross-cultural mission means, and I want to add to that definition. So the main point of Acts 8 is that cross-cultural mission includes people groups or different cultures that are nearby, and even those that have a troubled history with your own culture. I'll say that again. The main point of Acts chapter 8 is that cross-cultural mission includes people groups or other cultures that are nearby, and even those that have a troubled history with your own culture. So Philip is the main character of Acts chapter 8. And if you remember a few weeks ago, we talked about the formation of the first deacon board in the Bible, and that Stephen, the guy we talked about last week, for those of you who got to see the video, was one of the first deacons. He's also the first martyr. Well, Philip was also one of the first deacons to ever be selected by the church. And so he's kind of the hero. And so if we kind of pick up where we left off at the martyrdom of Stephen, he's just been killed. In Acts chapter 8, verse 1, it says, and Saul approved of their killing him. So this is kind of where we left off with the hope that Saul was there. If you don't know who Saul is, he will eventually become Paul, and a very influential figure in the New Testament, wrote several of the books of the New Testament. And this is kind of like the beginning of his story of transformation, as we're going to read on, that he first starts out persecuting the church instead of being a missionary for the church. So that's verse 1. And then it says, on that day, a great persecution broke out against the church in Jerusalem, and all except the apostles were scattered throughout Judea and Samaria. Now, that should be very challenging to us all. I know the majority of you are probably going to end up working in the marketplace. And in Chi Alpha, we say that we're not just equipping you for 4 years of ministry, but for 40. We want to be able to equip you to make disciples amongst your peers here, so that whenever you go out and get your job, you can do that in your career as well and be a missionary in the marketplace. But I want to kind of challenge our thinking on that. I just said the majority of you will go into the marketplace. I believe this verse pushes back on that a little bit, because it says that all except the apostles, that's basically like the entire church except the pastor, was sent out to be a missionary. And if you call yourself a follower of Jesus, I believe that full-time mission should at least be an option on the table for you. Because if it's not, can you really say you've given everything over to him? I know it's a challenging thought, but I'll say it again. If you call yourself a follower of Jesus, I believe that full-time mission should at least be an option on the table for you. And if it's not, can you really say that you've given everything over to him? Saying, I'll do anything to follow you, Jesus. Whatever you want me to do, I'll say yes to. And if that's not even an option that he has yet to, that you give him to say yes to, maybe you need to do some soul searching and see what you're holding on to and what part of you he's not getting. So verse 2, godly men buried Stephen and mourned deeply for him. But Saul began to destroy the church. Going from house to house, he dragged off both men and women and put them in prison. Those who had been scattered preached the word wherever they went. Philip went down to a city in Samaria and proclaimed the Messiah there. When crowds heard Philip and saw the signs he performed, they paid close attention to what he said. So we see there spiritual empowerment. He's performing miracles, and they're listening to what he has said. Cross-cultural mission. For with shrieks, impure spirits came out, and many who were paralyzed or lame were healed. So there was great joy in that city. So, like I said earlier, Jews and Samaritans did not mix. There was no, they weren't even supposed to be in the same room together. So this should challenge us, and I want to challenge you. One of the outreaches we do on campus all the time is, hey, have you found a campus ministry you get involved with yet? Just walk up to a stranger and say, hey, have you found a campus ministry you get involved with yet? They say no, tell them about Chi Alpha and invite them to your core group or to a house church. Or you could say, hey, can I ask you about a question about God? And then you go into something we call Bones, which stands for the bones of the gospel. It's a gospel presentation that your core group leader can teach you. Or you can say, hey, is there anything I can pray for you about? And then pray for them right there, then and there, if they have a prayer request. So I want you to write those 3 questions down. So it's, the first one is, hey, have you found a campus ministry to get involved with yet? The second one is, hey, can I ask you a question about God? The third one is, hey, is there anything that I can pray for you about? So here's what I want to challenge you to do. Philip reached out to someone who looked different than him and shared the gospel and had great success. A revival started. And we're all following Jesus as long as, most of us don't come from any kind of Jewish descent. And we have the gospel because someone down the road was willing to reach out to someone that looked different than them. So I want to challenge you. Ask one of those 3 questions to someone that looks different than you this week and see what happens. Just be bold enough to ask. What's the worst that could happen? So I want you to pause the video and discuss this question. What are some things standing in your way of living out that challenge? What are some things standing in your way to living out that challenge? Pause the video and discuss that amongst your group. So Philip has started this revival in Samaria and it's going really well. And then he encounters this guy named Simon the sorcerer. And as you're kind of reading the story, you're gearing up for this miraculous showdown between the two, because that's kind of what happens in the Old Testament. We see that with Moses and the Egyptian magicians and Elijah and the prophets of Baal. We see it throughout the Old Testament, this showdown between these opposing forces. But what happens is that Simon ends up following Jesus as well, and he gets baptized. And that should be very encouraging to us, because even the most unlikely people can come to Jesus. So second part of that challenge that I just gave you, invite someone that you think would never come, because you never know what God's going to do. One year at outreach, I decided I was going to invite every person that I thought would say, no way, I'm never coming to Chi Alpha. because I realized that what I was doing when I was selecting who I was going to talk to, I was kind of stereotyping other people who I thought would say no. And when you do that, you realize how judgmental your snap judgments actually are. And I invited all kinds of people. But my favorite one I invited a guy who had on a shirt that said 666. And I walked up to him and said, "Hey man, have you found a campus ministry to get involved with?" And he was kind of surprised that I was even like talking to him. And he was like, "Do you not, see my shirt?" I was like, "Yeah, I see that. Jesus doesn't care about that. Have you found a campus ministry to get involved with yet?" And he still looked confused, and he's like, nah, man, I'm good. And it just went on his way. But nothing terrible happened, like, sometimes we think. And you never know who's going to say yes, because I can guarantee you that all of those people were really grateful to have an invitation, everybody I asked that day, because nobody else is inviting them. Because I guarantee you that someone else who had the opportunity is probably going to pass on it too, because they're going to be thinking just like you, that they're never going to come, they're never going to respond positively to my question. So what's the worst that could happen? And if they say, "Oh, I'm Buddhist," or "I'm an atheist," or say, "Awesome, you're going to love Chi Alpha, you should come," and see what happens. So after this, Philip starts this revival. I mean, God's moving miraculously. People are getting baptized, coming to know Jesus. And then this angel shows up. This is the last half of chapter 8, and says to Philip, "Go down to the road, the desert road that goes south from Jerusalem to Gaza." So he started out, and on his way, he met an Ethiopian eunuch, an important official in charge of all the treasury. The man had gone to Jerusalem to worship and was on his way home, and was sitting in his chariot reading the book of Isaiah the prophet. Now, think about this. Philip is in the midst of this like huge number of people coming to know Jesus. And an angel, God orchestrated this whole thing. He sent an actual angel to Philip and said, "Hey, leave this whole group of people and go after this one dude in the middle of the desert who's leaving Jerusalem." What we should learn from that is that God values international relationships, cross-cultural relationships, and he values those that are here visiting us that we might not have an opportunity to talk to otherwise. This was a guy who was from far away. He was just visiting Jerusalem, and he was on his way home, and God orchestrated this huge thing to get Philip down there to talk to him. So we should make forming relationships with international students a priority, because they are a priority to God. And cross-cultural missions don't just naturally happen, so we have to pay special attention to those who are around us and stop acting like they don't exist. So here's some things that you can do to reach out to international students. If you have a class that you hate, everybody's got a class that they hate, and there's probably an international student in there. Maybe if it's an in-person class, you might sit by them, or they might sit by, near you, or maybe an international student in a Zoom class. If you hate that class, you should try to make it your mission to befriend that international student. I can guarantee you that they feel very lonely right now, because imagine just being away from your home, not just away from your home, but away in an entirely different culture, different country, don't even speak the same language as your native language, and you're in the middle of a pandemic and have to wear masks and all this stuff. So be intentional and form friendships with those international students. And if you have a class that you hate, you can make that a motivation for actually participating in the class and going to class, because now you have a new mission, a new reason for being there and showing up. Also try to do well in the class too. So yeah, go out to eat with them, invite them to out to eat with you, teach them about American food. They can teach you about their culture's food. Just have conversations and get to know them. Most international students want to meet Americans, and sadly, most actually don't get to because we're kind of independent and standoffish and don't reach out to them and befriend them. So make forming relationships with international students a priority because they are a priority to God. So I don't know if you know how fast a human being can run.
Wow, 13!
But it's not really that fast. And the Spirit told Philip to go up and just run alongside the chariot. And it's a chariot being pulled by a horse. So I guess I can see from the scriptures, if you want to have like supernatural speed, you can reach out to international students, because that's what the angel was prompting Philip to do. He's running across down, with this by this horse, and I would assume it's really loud because there's like a chariot. He's running, probably breathing heavy like that. And he hears this dude reading the book of Isaiah. The Ethiopian eunuch is reading the book of Isaiah, and Philip hears it. So he must have been reading really loud. And he's like, hey, do you understand what you're reading? And it works into an opportunity for Philip to come up and sit with the Ethiopian eunuch, read the scripture together, and end up sharing the good news about Jesus. He shared that every other religion is all about earning your way and trying to get to heaven by your own merit. But the gospel is all about Jesus and what he's done for us, and that everything that we do is a response to what he's already done for us. And the guy started following Jesus. The eunuch started following Jesus. And I love this part. He sees a pond or some kind of water, and he's like, hey man, there's water right there. What's standing in the way of me being baptized? Side note, we're doing baptisms at Fall Retreat this weekend. So what's challenge you? What's standing in your way of being baptized if you haven't been baptized yet? So not only should we be intentional to form relationship with international students, we should also be intentional to introduce them to Jesus, just like Philip was. Savo, the National Director for International Student Ministry with Chi Alpha, says that the international student is here to know Jesus. There are students all around the world that would have no access to the gospel except for coming to the United States to study abroad. And they're here. So we should think that God is orchestrating this so that they can have a chance to hear the gospel. We shouldn't worry about the rate of fruit, but the level of trust. So just share the gospel, and if it doesn't go anywhere, it's okay. You've done your part. You've planted the seed. But do everything you can to keep the trust with that international student. There's all kinds of things you can do. You can invite them to core group or go to church with you, like a cultural experience, because Christianity is pretty tied to American culture, especially in the South. Invite them to house church so they can see what it might have been a little bit like in the early church, in having church in houses. You can share the bones of the gospel like I shared earlier. Pray for them. Invite them to study the Bible with you one-on-one. Share your testimony with them. Vulnerability cuts through all pride and perceived pride. So I want to, last question, pause this video and discuss this question. When it comes to just sharing the gospel, what are your fears, challenges, or concerns? So when sharing the gospel, what are your fears, challenges, or concerns? So the last part of the story is that Philip is baptizing this Ethiopian eunuch, and he just disappears. And the eunuch just goes on his way rejoicing. See, we should expect God to do miraculous things in our lives when we engage in cross-cultural mission. The whole theme is spiritual empowerment, cross-cultural mission. So we should expect the spiritual empowerment. So we should pray with audacity and boldness. And that's how we're going to close tonight. I'm going to turn it back over to your core group leader or to your house pastor to close us out in prayer And I want you guys to intercede and pray with boldness, with expectation for God to move miraculously, to bridge racial divides, to reach to those that are just really far from you and would be unexpected for them to actually come to know you, and to bridge the divide between the American students and the international students, and ask God to move mightily in their lives and in our lives. So really enjoy walking through the book of Acts with you. We'll see you next week.